What language is Grandma speaking? Am I a Slav?
Why is everyone's last name end in ICH?
What's the big deal with San Pedro anyway?
Why do Slavs fish? Why do we eat so much mustacholi?
What is the old country?
Why did they come to America?
What was San Pedro like in the old days?
Did the Depression affect our family?
What were the inherent root causes of the mass immigration from Croatia to San Pedro in the early 1920s?
San Pedro. So many Slavs. So much fish. Here lies the story of two families. One named Karmlich. One named Uklasic. The Karmliches and the Uklasiches were like many other San Pedro Slavs. They were immigrants. All immigrants from a chain of islands along Europe's Adriatic coast. All from a place now known as Croatia. As for the Karmeliches, it is clear that many, many generations of Karmeliches lived in a city called Bol, on an island called Brač.
So we visited the church, we talked to the pastor, and he kept his records going way back. He had some periodicals, books or papers, and so on, dating back 500 years. I don't know how much they do have. I'm a little surprised to find there's one paper in 1502 where it lists the Karmelich name. In fact, there was a Carmel church in the city of Bol, Karmel.
The story is that the Slavic people started to migrate out of Siberia. That's where they migrated from, all the Slavic people. And they migrated from there, and some of them went to North Africa, and some went, of course, to Europe. And there was a group of them that started a village. They went to Mount Carmel, as what we know in the Bible today. And a group of them went there, and the warring factions pushed them around till they ended up in what was now the mainland of Croatia. And then the Turks came through there, and they pushed them on the island. So they started the village of Carmel, right there in Bol. And the ICICH in our last name stands for son of, and that's where our name originated from.
Now the Uklasic family were just a little bit north, on another island off the coast of Croatia.
It's a chain of islands, and it's called Dugi Otok, and they're in a little village called Velirat. Okay, Dugi Otok means Long Island, and Velirat means a big town.
Big town? Wow. So was that the biggest town on the island?
No, not by far.
I guess they had big plans for that town.
I guess they did. And it was the very last little village on this whole string of islands of Long Island. And like I said, it's primitive. It's just ocean around this little island, and there's really no cars, no streets. I mean, there's streets to walk on, pebbled roads. It's beautiful. The ocean right next to us keeps it a little cooler there. And the homes are, of course, very old, all tiled roofs.
And for years and years, generation after generation, Karmeliches, Uglasiches, and other Croatian families lived on these primitive islands.
Yeah, on island Brač. And they were all either fishermen or merchant seamen or farmers.
They go fishing and cooking and eating, that's all they got.
That's all they did?
Yeah, if you stay catching fish with a minute, You come home, then you cook or eat, then you go to bed.
They were very poor. They had very few activities. They have to create their own, and it was just survival.
They were rather poor.
It's a poor country, very poor country.
But she had it rough over, I remember her saying they were never hungry, but they had to lock their food.
Why?
Because they only had so much, and
ration
they're
it out.
afraid they're going to eat it all if they brought it all out. So they, they
Ration
would, bring the food out for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then it was locked. You just couldn't go grab something to eat if you wanted. And she never liked that idea.
Everybody helped one another out. You were all in the same boat, so you just helped each other survive.
The grandparents of Ben Karmelich and Marie Uglasic lived their entire lives on these Croatian islands.
It got enough that they lived in Bol, and their occupation was stayed either as fishermen or merchant marine. Merchant fleet either for Austria or Venice, Italy, or spread of foreign power.
Your mother and your father,
Yeah,
what do you remember about them? What were they like?
nice.
Nice people?
I think so.
What what did your father do for a living?
Nothing. Used to go to seaman, like.
Seaman.
Mostly like a seaman.
Merchant seaman.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Did he fish or was it
But
truck
people
cargo?
like home eat fish.
Mm-hmm.
That's our food.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
What did your mother do?
She's nothing like me. She's gone. She stayed home.
She always said her mother was funny, always laughing and joking, and her father was very serious and strict. I remember her saying they would all eat dinner, and then the kids would do something that was funny, and the mother would laugh, and he'd get so mad at all of them for laughing because they weren't supposed to laugh.
I know they didn't have much, and people were, catching fish, and that was their main food and stuff around where they are. But I believe a lot of them were like seamen. The big ships would come from Italy and so on, and they would work on those and travel the world.
I thought our father's father was the postmaster. So I remember that he was he was like the big shot on the island. I mean, it was very small.
Yeah, but I think he probably had a little bit of more prestige than just a regular fisherman or seaman or farmer.
Yeah.
And there was really not that much work on the island. It was too small and nothing much to do there. So they were seamen. That's what they did. They went a lot of them went all over the world.
Ivan Uglasic was born in Veli Rat in 1894. There, he had 11 brothers and sisters.
There was 11 originally in the
11 in the
family.
family.
There was total of 12 siblings. Yeah.
He was a twin, so I think he was around third or fourth from the eldest. Yeah.
But at the age of just 16, probably due to the events leading up to World War I, Ivan had decided to leave the fishing village where generations before him had lived and head toward a place called America.
No, all I knew is that he grew up there, of course, born there and left when he was 16 years old. See, it seems to me that he talked about always escaping. He used that word, that he got out, that he got away.
Meanwhile, on the island of Brach, a young Frank Karmelich was not so lucky to escape the horrors of World War I.
He fought in the Austrian-Hungarian army, and I know he was wounded in his leg. He showed me his wound.
Austria-Hungary, specifically Austria. They controlled what is now Croatia, and that includes the Dalmatian coast.
Okay.
So when they went to war, they recruited all the young men they could. He had no choice. He got drafted in the army, or rather shoved in the army. But it was under Austria at that time, and the Austrian officials went up and down the Dalmatian coast from island to island. He was in infantry, and he fought the Italians and the French. The fighting was on the boundaries between Italy and what is now Croatia. Once on a beach, he showed me all his wounds. 3 in the leg, upper part and lower part, and 2 in the back. He had a fight because you drafted him, so to speak. He didn't care one way or the other. He didn't want to talk about it much. He hated it.
Yeah.
And he talked very little. He only answered questions when me or my brother asked the question.
Yeah.
I thought that he didn't even like to talk about it.
After the war, Frank Karmlich returned to Bol. There he married a young lady on the island named Franka Svitanich. Frank and Franka not only had similar names, but had a very similar background.
I know she had a young brother that died early, and then she had a number of sisters.
Oh, go ahead.
The brother that died, he was the youngest in the family. My mother was the second youngest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So my mother grew up being the youngest.
Frank and Franka soon were married on the island of Brach.
It's just a small town that you were limited to your acquaintances and so on. And it was all they can do to not marry first cousins.
So with a new young bride and a baby on the way, Frank Karmlich, too, began to turn his attention to America.
People figured America was a better place to live in than where they lived in then. So many people went to America. In fact, as far as the city of Bol, over half the people eventually came to America.
Some people say that I give America.
Just a better life. Their life over there was, they were very, very poor, and they lived a very, very simple life, and they dreamt about all the wealth in the United States. My mother actually thought she can live off the coins that were thrown out in the street that nobody wanted. I mean, that's the vision they had of the United States in those days. A lot of people went to Australia and South America, anything to get away from all that poverty.
Mostly in America, though.
Yeah.
Ivan Uglasic came to America in 1912 at the age of 16.
I remember that he came into New Orleans, but Betty remembers him telling her that he did come to New York. They might have gone to New Orleans from there on the ship. I don't know how he got from there to New Orleans to Chicago to Colorado. I know they went trains when they were on the land, but Betty remembers. What do you remember?
I remember him and his friends that they were walking on the street. They had no money or, pennies, and kids were throwing snowballs at them and making fun of them. They probably had some, who knows what kind of coats. He goes, we had coats on, but I don't know if they were, what they were like. But he goes, kids were throwing snowballs at him and making fun of them.
Then he settled in Pueblo, Colorado before he came to the West Coast. And he worked in a bakery, and the reason he always talked about that, and he worked in the machinery part of a bakery. I mean, he probably spoke no English, and so he just did, menial labor. And he always says he had a hearing problem, had some deafness at his old ages because he was always with this loud machinery. And that's why he always talked about Colorado and how he did that. And then from there, he went to state of Washington, had some relatives there, and then came down to San Pedro, where he knew a lot of people, too, that had come from his island.
In 1921, it was Frank Karmlich's chance to come to America. And even though his wife was pregnant, he left as soon as he got the opportunity.
The opportunity come, you can't not pass it up. I mean, or you weren't going to make it.
Visco Karmlich, and he wrote him to my father how better it was over here. He lived better. At that time, the ships sailed from Italy. Nearest Italian port, it wasn't that far. And they went all the way to New York, registered there. In fact, we still could find the entry there.
Well, in those days, there was an allotment from each country. And even though you had to have a sponsor, you had to have somebody who would sponsor you here, and you had to wait for your allotment. Our great uncle, Barbara Visco, was responsible for many people coming from the island of Brach. And just like Bogdanovich was responsible for many people coming from the island of Vis. And they fished together here. And like I say, after World War I, the allotments started to open up, and they started to bring their relatives and friends over. And that's why the majority of the people in San Pedro, when we were growing up, we were either from the island of Brach or from the island of Vis, and because of those two. Then obviously it took weeks to get here because, you know, you go by ship and then you go by rail.
He had took a ship in Italy.
Yeah, went to Italy to catch a ship there.
Then there to New York, and from New York to San Pedro.
Meanwhile, back on Bull, Franca Karmlich gave birth to triplets, 3 girls. Tragically, none of the triplets survived.
You know, you have to know that there was no hospitals or no doctors or nurses.
And the medical condition wasn't as good as today. If the triplets were born today, they would have survived. But back then, medicine wasn't that good. We lived a couple of days and they died.
Well, she labored 10 days and 2 of them were breached. And like I said, there were midwives helping her. And they lived 24 or 48 hours. I had kind of a unique experience when the first time I went back there. I was looking for this one priest that Mama had known, and I finally found him in the church, and he was saying mass to nobody. It was communism was there, and if you went to if you became a Christian, you didn't move up in your position.
Yeah.
Immediately after the mass, he met us in the patio there, and they're very emotional. He's hugging and kissing and crying and carrying on, and immediately in the Slavic language he says, "Come here, come with me, come with me." And I'm looking at my wife and I wonder what the heck is going on here. So he ran us through the church, and then we came upon the cemetery that was not very large. And he's saying in the Slavic language, "Here they are, here they are." And I just, it didn't hit me. And finally he says, "Here's your angels." And I still got emotional, but that was our 3 sisters. And I can always remember that. Yeah. The priest baptized them, and we always had a big picture in our living room of the 3 sisters.
What happened to them?
I don't know what happened to that picture, but they were all dressed in white with the white bonnets, and they had their eyes open.
Ivan Uklasic and Frank Karmlich probably arrived in San Pedro about the same time. Ivan had been in Colorado and Washington, but probably came to San Pedro in the early 1920s.
He was fishing and lived with different people, boarding house type things. All relatives. We had a relative that owned this big house there on 12th and Center, and quite a few lived there. And his other brother had come out, and they all lived there. People would iron their clothes and take care of them. They'd pay them a certain. Well, he had this. He got this apartment, or they rented it then. I think they probably stayed with someone when they first got here. Maybe it was Uncle Nick, was it? I don't know. He did not own his own home in those 20 years. He probably didn't want to buy a home. He didn't have anybody to live there with him.
It wasn't too good. He was disappointed when he came, and he made some money, but not very much.
Well, he came out, and he told me that he only had 1 change of clothing. He lived with his aunt and uncle, and he would go on the docks where the fishing boats would come in, and he said he would actually hope that some of the boats had trouble and tore their nets, because that's the only way he can get any work. He would help sew the nets up, and eventually, I don't know how long it took, he finally got a job on one of the boats.
It's Vincent Karmlich. He built 2 houses, one for Marinkovich, when I told you he sent his wife, and one for my father. And now the house back of his main house, it's a little 1-bedroom house, still standing. I think it's 249 West 13th Street.
In 1924, Frank was able to have his wife join him in America.
Yeah. And eventually, I think it took approximately 3 years where he had enough money to bring my mother over.
He was hoping to bring her back within a year, but I didn't make enough money fishing. Money to pay the passage and ship, and then come over to New York, and from New York to San Pedro. And she came with Some named Franka Marinkovic, who's the father of John and Tony Marinkovic.
My mother was very disappointed. She would have to do the laundry for the boat that he was on, and she was begging my father to send her back because she was doing all the laundry for all the seamen, because most of them were either married or without their wives or single, and she worked very hard, and she expected a lot of she was gonna live the life of luxury.
Ivan Uklasic wouldn't get married for 15 more years, and when he did, he returned to his home island of Dugi Otok, and there he met Antitsa Uklasic for the first time.
So I guess he decided it was time for him to go to get married, and I'm sure he had a lot of met a lot of people here, but apparently what his choice was to go back to Dugi Otok and marry somebody from his own little island. And of course he met my mother there, and my mother, of course, he didn't know at all because she was 20. He was 16 when he left. It wasn't like she was worried that she was marrying somebody that she had never heard of. She had always heard of him because all the families knew each other, just that she had never met him. But this was done in those days.
It was like probably you grabbed it if you had the chance, because you get to come over
that
here.
Was the mentality then, to better yourself, get a better life, find somebody that you could have a better life with. So with someone doing that, I mean, I think that it was like a
good catch.
A good catch, and even though he was so much older, and it's like in America, well, everybody's rich, and money grows on trees, that sort of thing. So the family, though they hated to see her leave, they saw a big opportunity for her, and I'm sure she did too, as little as she knew at 22.
And so Antitsa Uklasic married Ivan Uklasic, and so her name became Antitsa Uklasic.
Her maiden name, my mother's maiden name is the same as her married name because of this small village they're from. But they weren't related. She says they were not related.
She always says they were not related.
But within their little tiny velidot, they all married each other, and I'm sure a lot of them were cousins even, because there seems to be only two names there, Merkovich and Uglasic. And then after they got married, they stayed a few days more, I think. They had to prepare themselves for their journey, and then I think they went to Italy and took this ship. I'm sure it was tearful. She said that. Her mother cried. She cried. She told me that years ago. Then they left, and they got on a ship, and she knows the name of the ship. I can't remember it offhand. And they knew other people on the ship at the same time that were going back. And they went to New York, and then they came to San Pedro on a train. Because you remember saying she stopped in Chicago. And that was 1935 in June. All right, so I was conceived there. I assume that's 9 months later.
Between, that's like almost.
Oh, that's what Ben used to tease me, that I was, conceived in the old country, so I was really a foreigner. I should have dual citizenship. Well, he got this apartment, or they rented it then. I think they probably stayed with someone when they first got here. Maybe it was Uncle Nick, was it?
Uncle Nick.
Oh, he lived with his brother, Uncle Nick, when they moved.
Did you like Uncle Nick? Did you like Nick? Was he nice? What's that?
He didn't hit me.
And so then they stayed with him until they found this apartment. Then they found this apartment on 13th and Center.
Upon their arrival to America, a new generation of Karmeliches and Uglasiches were born.
My brother was born at a home they were renting there on 12th and Center, and then later on we moved into my great uncle's little house, and myself and my sister were born actually in the house right there.
Was there a
You were born in the kitchen.
Yeah. My mother told me I was born on the kitchen table. That's why Mom was hungry.
Everybody was born in the hospital. We had midwives and doctors.
Hospital? Oh,
yeah, we were both born in the hospital, San Pedro Hospital.
So
it was 23 that March when I was born, and Betty was born 2.5 years later. I was named Marie, which is Maria, after a grandmother, and Antoinette my mother's name was Antitsa, so they thought that the American word or English word would be Antoinette, which it isn't. But that's why they named me Marie Antoinette. And then my sister, was named Betty Jane, which was so, Marie Antoinette and Betty Jane. Well, the reason she was named Betty Jane is because my father had a cousin in Portland, Oregon that he really liked a lot, and he stayed with them when he first came here from the old country, and her name was Betty, the daughter, Betty Jane, so that's why he wanted to name the second daughter Betty Jane.
And it was shortly after Ben Carmelich was born that his mother discovered his heart murmur.
No, my mother discovered.
His heart doesn't actually beat like a normal person. He has a hole that's enlarged and a hole that's smaller than other. His heart actually buzzes other than beats, because I can remember doing that. But anyway, and he wasn't allowed to do anything physically. They
thought maybe I'd live to 18 or something.
Yeah, but
whether they believe it or not.
He couldn't participate in sports or anything because of that situation, and the family kind of babied him, and not let him do anything physically because they're always afraid that something's going to happen. And yet, whenever we used to have street gangs at that time, and we would go out and play football against another gang, and I was usually the ball carrier. I always used him for my interference. I would grab a hold of his belt and say, "Let's go." When we got away from Mama, he participated in everything that we did.
Many have wondered why the Slavs came to San Pedro. Well, the answer can be summed up in one wonderful four-letter word: fish.
Well, fishing, that was the main occupation of all of them that came from the islands in Croatia, because that's what they knew. And here there was, you could catch a lot of fish from one end of the coast to the other, up in Alaska and Washington, San Francisco, all the ports, and there was money in it. They sold to the canneries and made a living that way.
We had the biggest fishing fleet in the world here in San Pedro.
Fishing fleet, yeah.
Fishing fleet. And it was primarily because of people like Bogdanovich and Vilicic. They were pioneers down here.
Yeah, he mainly fished in Mexico. Well, there's seasons. You go to Mexico in the summer where it's tuna and all that, and then you go to local fishing, which is sardines. Or he went up to Seattle and fished salmon, and Alaska for salmon, and he fished in San Francisco for sardines. It was all different seasons, and then he'd be gone. When he fished in Mexico for the tuna and all, a good trip is 2-3 weeks. He'd be gone.
That was a good trip.
Yeah, sometimes they'd stay several months if they had enough provisions.
In the sardine season, generally the sardine season was around Monterey and San Francisco, and they would go up there for almost a month, and the fish would not come to the surface in the light of the moon. So when the full moon would come, they would come home and spend 4 or 5 days at home. And most of the time they did some local fishing, and Ben and I would go out with them once in a while, but then the tuna seemed to migrate south, and they would go to Mexican waters for about a month. So there was, we didn't see a lot of our father when he was fishing.
Some were cooks, some were engineers, some were massmen. They all had their different job and I think they had great times together. A lot of camaraderie.
And when the fishermen were in, if they were in port, they would get together. They would start off in a small group and go from house to house. Our home was like in the middle, and they would sit outside and sing some songs about, the
old country.
Yeah, the old country. If you don't open the door, we're going to break it down, type of thing.
Every fisherman had their specialty, and Frank Carmelich was no exception.
He became a crewman on the fishing boat, and he became a mast man, which that's the ones that spot the fish. And he eventually, became partners in a couple of boats with other of our relatives.
From Bull.
Yeah.
He was a part owner of a boat.
So he earned enough to buy into a boat?
Yeah. In the early days of the fishing industry down here, Bogdanovich, who started the
fish canneries.
The fish canneries, he did not have enough money to pay the men that brought in the fish, so he would take it on a consignment, and when he made his money, he would pay off the fishing boats. And eventually, when he became prosperous, he would loan money to the Slav people to let them build their boat, like my father. and other people who would actually loan them money with no interest. And in turn, they would bring their catch to the cannery, and that's how they paid him back.
They shared the profits. That was the system they had there. Maybe whatever money they made, divided in 16 shares. That was common. 16 shares, and maybe about 9 or 10 crew they had, all got one share. The owners got the other 6 shares. So my father got part of the six shares, and plus one whole share, and he was usually the mass man. In high school, during the summer, when I was 15, 16, and 17, I used to go fishing with my father. And so did my brother Mike, so we came on different times. I went for a week, and my brother went for a week. This would happen for about a month or 2.
Meanwhile, Ivan Uglasic was developing his talents as a boat skipper.
Sometimes he had his own boat, didn't he? Mainly a skipper every time he worked, and a lot of times he skippered other boats for other people. You know, when they say their skipper took a trip off or didn't have one owner. A lot of times the boats were owned by canneries, and then they'd call my father to go and fish on them. Yeah. Or we'd know that when they're coming home, we only knew by the radio, or they'd telephone if they were somewhere that stopped, and then they would say they're coming in on Sunday at 2 o'clock. We'd all run down, you know, to the
wait for the
boat to come in. He'd be gone for months. Yeah, sometime months. And we were so excited when he was coming home, though. We'd run down that 16th Street. He'd be walking home. He'd get off the ship, and we weren't that far. He'd come up the hill by the Dalmatian
Sometimes we'd
Club.
get there before the boat, but if the boat came in a little bit earlier, he'd just start
walking home. I mean, we were like God was coming. Yeah, a little kid running to greet him. That was because he was gone so long, and he always brought us some little thing, candy or something, you know, probably that he bought at the market there. But it was always. Did it sink?
One sunk. I knew that. I don't know what happened to the other one.
Yeah. Yeah. We have rough weather or whatever.
Something
of course,
happened,
everybody always. As soon as a boat sinks, they think there's sunk it on purpose for the insurance.
That wasn't it at the time.
At his no, but then he didn't. It really wasn't that successful on his own. Towards the end, he was quite, got pretty far down. So we helped a lot. That's what Betty and I were growing up, and went to work and helped out at home too.
Now the Karmeliches and the Uglasiches were among many, many Croatian families in San Pedro, and much of the Croatian culture came along with them.
Our entire neighborhood was all Croatian people, store owners, the vendors, and so on. So that's why neither one of us spoke any English when we went to school.
Remember, I don't know why, but I still remember that because they spoke a funny language. The funny language is English. Even the banks said, that somebody there spoke Croatian.
No, it wasn't funny because we spoke a Croatian only in the home because she didn't know English, and all the neighbors were Croatian, so you really didn't learn. I didn't learn that much English.
And then our father spoke English to us.
Oh, okay, because he'd already been here.
Yeah, he always spoke English to us.
But she didn't.
My mother didn't, but he did.
We spoke the language, and I could never get away from speaking the language to my mother, even though she wanted me to speak English, and it just came out natural. And that's another little story, too.
Slavic.
When I went overseas, I was gone for a couple of years, and I never spoke the language, obviously. And when I got discharged in Northern California, and on my way home, I'm visualizing meeting my girlfriend and meeting my mother. And I couldn't think of one word in Croatian. I could not even think of kakosi. I couldn't think of anything. And I literally and actually was perspiring, thinking, how am I going to greet my mother? And anyway, so I come to the front door, and my girlfriend, my wife, met me first, and then my mother come out of the kitchen. I automatically started speaking Croatian. It just came to me, and up to that time, knocking on the door, I'm wondering, how am I going to talk to my mother? Because I never spoke to her in English.
In the town of San Pedro, everybody seemed to have a nickname.
And he had a name. Everybody had nicknames then. Everybody had nicknames in San Pedro. I didn't know anyone. All these, they were not only relatives, but fishing friends and so on. You didn't know them by their first name. You knew them by their nickname. And my father was Nostromo, Nostromo, which means like a helmsman of a ship, and that because he was always like a skipper. So they go, if I'd see somebody and say, well, you know, who's your father, John? We don't know him. Nostromo. Oh, Nostromo. You know, that was his name, right? And that's the way he went by that. The answer to it. Or their names were from their home, like in the homes in Velirad, they had. You know, this house was the Garjanove, which is the name of these people. Why I don't realize, and I don't know what that name means. So then somebody would come over here and they'd call him that name because they knew what house he came in within the village. So there was, you know, that's all they.
Do you know the name of their house, like Daddy's house?
Yeah, they were the Lovrinchove, and my mother's was the Radini. Remember? And so then they call my mother Radinka because she was from the Radini side of whatever that house was.
Back in Croatia, they didn't have much money. Here in San Pedro, they still didn't have much money, but things were still better.
Well, we were very fortunate. You know, we were raised during the Depression time, and obviously there was no money in the house, but, you know, I guess we were poor, but who knew it? You know, we were fed, we were warm, we were loved.
It affected us that much, because fishing still was pretty good. Even in the Depression. Still fish in the water, they're fishing to know about our economics. It was a big event, we got a washing machine. It was a big event. Tell me about it. My mother was so happy about it. She always did it by hand before.
Yeah.
And we got a washing machine, it was like heaven. She didn't think such things existed.
I remember when we got our first radio. I was about 11 or 12 years old. And we got our phone my first year in high school. I was 16. There was no money, you know, to be had, you know. We were raised during the Depression.
I felt middle. I didn't feel poor.
No, never.
No, but as a kid, you don't feel poor. Like my mother said, she didn't feel that poor when she was growing up over there because everybody was the same. So you don't really feel a class difference.
Right. No.
It got better for us. And, you know, when you think about how they were raised and what poverty they were in, when they eventually owned their own home and had some money in the bank, man, they felt like millionaires.
And then fishing was pretty good. You got enough money to buy a house at 325 13th Street. At that time it was common. The Yugoslav fishermen just they saved the money, they got enough, they buy the house all cash. No mortgage, they didn't know what a mortgage was. They didn't know what the word was.
Even though the Slavs were proud of where they came from, almost all in San Pedro were eager to become American citizens.
He spoke very broken, but he got his citizenship. He was real proud of that.
They studied hard for all the American information. That was funny listening to them, but they memorized everything.
You know, the classes, and then he had to take a test. He was real proud of that. We had a barbecue at the house, invited the neighbors over and everything.
Yeah, and later on, my mother too, our mother.
My mother really wanted to, though, be American, and she was very wanted to get her citizenship when she was eligible. At 15th Street School, where I was going to school, they had classes to citizenship classes, and they went for years to learn English and then she got her citizenship papers. She voted. They were all excited about voting once they were citizens. It's a big thing. Well, I remember her being so nervous when it was time to take the test and stuff. Yeah. But she became a citizen as soon as she could.
Mm-hmm.
The Karmelich household changed forever while the kids were still small in the early 1930s, when Frank Karmelich was involved in a fishing accident.
He hurt himself going from one boat to another, and he hurt his knees, and he became crippled. And at times there were some people who would let him go up on the mast, and I remember going out with him one time, and I watched him go up the ladder to get to the crow's nest, and he couldn't use his legs. He just went up with his arms, and pretty soon he couldn't even do that, and he just had to stay at home.
He had to walk with crutches, and rest of his life he walked on crutches. He had to stop fishing. He still made some money because he's still part owner of fishing boats, so he got part of that share back. And he went on some trips even though he went on crutches, and that's some menial tasks.
And all of us kids we had to turn to pretty young, go to work and so on, but that was the way it was. It was no big deal. My brother worked at the YMCA for 6 years. We forged my sister's birth certificate so she can get a Social Security card early. I started working, I was shining shoes when I was 6 years old. Sold papers. Had my first steady job at 11 years old. I owned a bakery. I cleaned pots and pans. People would go over to the shipyards and work during the war. I would get 50 papers and I got a penny for every paper I sold. I would stay there until I sold them. But I would always keep one copy because I would give it to the bus driver and he would take me to junior high school. That's how I got to school. My mother went to work in the cannery.
Terminal Island. Yeah, 4 or 5 canneries there. Well, there's 4 or 5 canneries. Starkist was one that became the biggest of them.
And where did she work for?
French sardine. Odd name. Still doing tuna. Despite the name, it was tuna.
There were so many things that the Slavs in San Pedro had in common. Everybody fished, everybody had a vegetable garden, and everybody made their own wine.
My father was a great wine maker. In fact, they all were. They didn't like the wine that was sold in the stores. They didn't taste right. They all made their own wine.
If you go to any house below Pacific Avenue, there's a wine cellar, and people made their wines, and we were stomping grapes, and you could smell that wine in the whole neighborhood because everybody was doing it. And they had these big vats, the old wooden
Well, they
vats.
used to rent those vats.
Yeah, they rent them and deliver them. The wine barrel was coming today to make the wine, so that would come in the backyard.
And they'd stomp the
and
grapes.
we'd have.
I used to just put on my trunks because I would get buried. And what you would do, see they would crush the grapes, and then what you didn't want to do is have the sun hit just one section of it. So all you wanted to do was turn it over so that different parts would hit the sun. You're not actually crushing it at that time. It's already been crushed by machine. But it's put in these big vats before they put them in the barrels. So I used to go from neighborhood house to house to house to house. And that's how I get rid of my athlete's feet. And anyway, I did come home and hose myself off because I was purple up to here.
Yeah.
And then of course, see, people had different reputations who made the better wine.
Yeah.
And they would say,
really?
this people, they don't make wine. That's kvasina. Kvasina means vinegar. So then they would be good for vinegar. They'd say his wine, and everybody had their own wines and their own recipes, and that was the big thing. They called it bivanda. That's wine with water. That was the Croatian name for it. And I think that's the way they drank it in Croatia, too. Nobody drank it straight, right?
I don't know.
They all cut it down. It's too strong. I don't know why. Or else they're preserving it, saving it. I don't know how that started. No one drank just straight wine like you do now out of a bottle. Always we had our own big gallons you'd go down to the cellar, tap it out of the big barrel.
What my dad used to do, he used to somehow or another, you're allotted so much, but he always somehow managed to double it. I don't know how he managed it because we bootlegged our wine to the fishing boats.
Although he couldn't work, Frank Carmelich continued to raise his family in San Pedro.
He worked around the house. Believe it or not, he started cooking. He started cleaning the house. They sort of trade positions. Occasionally he would go on a fishing boat for some menial task.
I see.
But between his share of the profit of the fishing boat and my mother working in the fish cannery, we got along all right. But we had no mortgage at the house.
They didn't read the paper or anything, listen to the radio here and there, Joe Louis was big in my father's life. He used to want to go watch the movies just because the fights was on, and of course Roosevelt was the big hero. And other than that, there was no, everybody was a Democrat in those days, because of Roosevelt.
The car's about 1941. The reason we bought a car, the war broke out in Europe, World War II.
Okay.
And it was fashionable at that time to buy a car in case, it seems funny now, in case the country got invaded, you and your family could all rush in a car and drive away.
I do recall one time we were in the Isthmus of Catalina, and we anchored there, and all the guys were putting on their swim trunks, and they were going to go swimming, and I put mine on, and I was fearful. I was 11, 12 years old. I was fearful of going into deep water. And my dad says, "Your mother told me you can swim." And I says, "Well, I never swam in deep water." He says, "You can swim." He threw me overboard. I swam.
One of the Carmelich clan, Ben Carmelich, didn't care for the smell of fish, and he wanted to go to college.
Oddly enough, they thought maybe the very best would go 1 year, because they couldn't afford more than 1 year. And after that, I would somehow work on land. It was sympathetic to my desire. I didn't like fishing. I applied to both Stanford and Berkeley. I got accepted in both schools, but tuition in Stanford is so much higher. I think it was around close to $500 at that, which is enormous. In Berkeley was just $15.
In 1942, Frank Carmelich was killed in an automobile accident.
Oh, when he died, I was in Berkeley, that's right. In fact, I was a freshman, my first year, my first semester.
I'll just tell you, I was driving the car, and what happened, I took my dad to Monrovia. He went to see a specialist there. And Ralph DiMiglio, our neighbor, and one of the guys in the gang went with me, keep me company, and we went to the doctor. We visited the doctor and hit the doctor. On the way back, we had a severe rainstorm. Dad he was in the passenger side. I was driving, Ralph was in the back, and the rain was coming down real hard, and there was a lot of landslides. There was all kinds of rocks, and obviously I was going fairly slow because I was a new driver, and I'm dodging the rocks, and I hit one rock, and the car started to move sideways. My dad grabbed the handle of the door, and because the momentum was going this way, the door went open, and he fell out, and he hit the back of his head. So we got some cars passing by, we waved them down, and they finally got the ambulance there. So we got him to the hospital, and he died the next day. Saddest day of my life.
You remember having to come back and tell your mom?
Do I ever? In those days, the body stayed in the house.
Oh,
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, and then in those days, they would take the body from the house, and you would have a procession to the church, the Old Mary Star on 9th and Center. And there was only one Catholic cemetery at the time, that was at Holy Cross, and that's where he's at now, and that's where my mother is next to him.
Things in San Pedro changed forever on the day the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
Well, most of the country, we thought we had, the oceans were going to keep us apart. And, even when we knew that the Germans were doing all those, killing the Jews and everything, everybody wanted to stay out of the war. And of course, when they hit us in Pearl Harbor, then it all changed, and everybody wanted to volunteer, and everybody became very patriotic. I know I personally was very patriotic, and I had a chance to go in the Merchant Marines, and I turned it down because I wanted to go fight. And I was 14 weeks in training, and the next thing I know, I'm in New Guinea, and 18 years old, and soon find out what the war was all about.
Oh yeah, I remember Pearl Harbor, them saying that happened. That's when we started with all these sirens and darkness, and so.
I was on our front porch in the old house in 13th and Center, and we had the radio on, and we heard it, and of course we thought, well, hell, 3 months the war would be over, would knock the hell out of the Japs, Yeah, three months, all right, took us 4 years.
4 years later. Yeah, that's it. Everybody in high school had to have a gas mask, and they were trained to put out incendiary fires in case the enemy incendiary bombs in San Pedro. You're supposed to get a bucket of sand and throw it on the bomb.
We had to keep the lights out and different things, and there was There was a boat hit out here in
A couple of airplanes flew over.
Fort MacArthur had some big weapons there, and everybody was firing like crazy. You know, the best I can remember, I was more curious than anything. I'm in the backyard looking to see what's happening. Of course, we had enough sense to run for cover.
I remember the war when they had air raids and then with the sirens. I was scared to death, and then my dad explained to it.
We had to turn all the lights
you have to turn off all the lights. And we got by the radio and listened to Roosevelt and all that stuff.
I volunteered in the Army and volunteered in the Air Force. And they wouldn't take me because of my heart murmur.
He was an ROTC. Officers Training School.
They had ROTC for 20 years after the war. They continued. So I was in the ROTC, and that was my military training. And we went to firing range and did marching and so on.
But they wouldn't.
I had a lot of friends that were killed, classmates.
Yeah, likewise.
You know,
A guy named Roy Peterson was my best friend. His parents were Norwegian. He got killed in the war. There was about 3 or 4 I knew they got killed.
Japanese Americans, just like, Italian Americans. I had one extremely close friend, Takuji Yamamoto. I kept in contact with him. They shipped him out, put him in Kansas.
Quite well, too.
I was in Terminal Island shaking hands with Takuji as the train was moving out.
Yeah, I was down there, too.
I thought it was wrong because I had friends there, and they were as good Americans as we were.
And I remember then going to school, and then and I remember the war being over, and it was VJ Day and Victory Days, and we'd have these big carnivals at school. We'd line up, and they'd play all this march music.
Yeah.
We'd march all over the schoolyard, and shaped like a V, we would do. It was sort of like a drill team.
Yeah.
Doing all these things, but we were in grade school.
The effect of World War II on the old country was far worse than what was being experienced in America.
My father had a twin brother in the old country, but he was killed over there. He was by himself by the school, and somebody came and they shot him. Somebody shot him from there, and then they come and tell his family that somebody got shot. Then everybody went to see, and it was him, Dad's twin brother.
They sent down somebody shoot somebody.
They heard somebody shot somebody. Who killed him? Who came? Who was it?
Italians.
Italians.
Yeah. Mama helped them out an awful lot after World War
II.
You have to remember that that country had a population of 13 million, and when the war broke out, and they lost 2 million. They were not only fighting the Italians and the Germans; they were fighting themselves. And they said that during the war, it was almost better than after the war, because the Italians and the Germans raped their country and took everything of value out of the country, and if they didn't have people in the United States or someplace to help them out, they would have starved, because they had nothing there in that country. They had no natural resources. They had nothing over there, and so they lost 2 million out of 13 million. Mm-hmm. That country lost more people percentage-wise than any country during the war. So like Mama would send maybe 20 packages a month over there.
Clothes.
And she would buy new clothes and wash them to make them look like old clothes, because they had to pay taxes on new clothes. And she would wash them and not iron them. And they even saved the string. Mama had a heavy string, like fishing string, that she
I remember that real heavy string.
Yeah, they'd even save that. And saved the cover and everything, and they really thought very highly of our mother for what she did. And she went back like I say, on 3 different occasions, and each time she went over there with all kinds of suitcases and trunks and everything, and came back with a handbag.
Ivan Uklasic was known as a fine skipper. He also was driving when he was on land.
My father had a car.
He was the only one who had a car.
Within all the people from Dugiatuk, so he drove everybody.
Every
Do you remember what kind
Buick. Always the first one was a Buick, second one was a Buick.
Always a Buick.
Did he buy it?
Forever, say it was a wedding. He took us to the wedding and he left to go pick up somebody. He'd come back, drop them off, go back again. I mean, we'd be packed in the car.
Packed.
No
20 people would get out of the car when we'd pull up.
Yeah, and then he'd leave again to go pick up the next group. He was the only one who had a car. And he took everybody home. He brought everybody and took everybody home.
It was a big Buick and with a low, straight back, four door.
But we were the only ones
in our group, in their relatives,
that had a car.
Except it was always the chauffeur and the cab driver.
Yeah.
For everybody.
My
mother used to complain all the gas, of course gas was who knows what then. It wasn't
10 cents a gallon.
Yeah. How much we use always, he was taking everybody. She used to complain once in a while, Or if they would not be nice to my mother, well, look at my father taking them everywhere,
But when it came to running the Euclisich household, it was Antitsa who was in charge.
Right. So my father would call at dinner time, come out and call us for dinner. We ignored him, kept playing. My mother would come out, just show her face.
She just would stand on the porch and we'd go home.
My mother made us go to bed at 9:30 every night, no matter, because that's when she went. I don't care if we slept and we were wide awake or couldn't sleep. 9:30, I had to go to bed.
Had to go to bed.
No matter what. You had your own room. I could put the radio on, but she didn't want the radio.
Yeah.
And I was there wide awake. That's why I think I stay up late all these years, because she made me go to bed. That was one of the biggest things when I finally got married and got out of the house. I could stay up as long as I want.
We did. We had to go to bed. When she said bed, that was it. Turn the TV off and you went to bed.
Didn't even argue.
No.
Care that she was in charge. No, he didn't care. He was very easygoing.
And whatever she needed, he did.
Oh, yeah. She was the boss.
Whatever.
Really?
Oh, poof.
Yeah.
Go to the store. He'd go to the store. I need this. He'd go get that.
He did everything for her, and then we did.
Her. My father used to say, "You happy?" I say, "Yeah, Daddy, I'm happy. I'm happy."
Yeah.
That's what he always said.
I don't remember you ever telling me.
Oh, always. You happy?
I didn't care if I was. No. But she did it all. She didn't expect us to cook at all. We worked, we went to school, we came home, we played. We didn't even keep up our room until she shamed us into it. One day she decided not to make the bed. We'd come home, everything was perfect. Our beds.
She used to iron our clothes, and if we wore something that you could wear again, she pressed it again before she put it in the closet.
Right.
I mean, she did we did nothing.
No, the one.
That's all
She
did everything. And they ironed everything. She ironed sheets, dish racks. The dish towels, she ironed them.
Yeah.
Everything was ironed.
She loved ironing, though. I don't know why.
She used to iron everything.
Yeah. And she was known as having a really good sense of humor. My mother, quick on the uptake, fast answers. You wouldn't know it now, and you didn't know it growing up because of the English language, but she did, and so that was her reputation. My father was a very nice person, good-hearted, happy-go-lucky, and he had a very nice singing voice. Loved to sing. Oh yeah, my cousin Sonia. The one that was at my mother's party, and her sister Maria, who died. I mean, they sang beautifully at all the Christmas and parties and stuff, and any wedding, they would start off the singing. They had beautiful voices, which I know I didn't inherit, but my father had a very good voice.
At the Karmelich household, Franco is now in charge of the family.
I used to forge everything. My mom wouldn't allow me to play sports. So I forged her name to everything. She didn't even know I played high school basketball or anything. The reason why they didn't want you to play sports because they thought maybe you get hurt and wouldn't be able to work. And that was the whole philosophy. And yeah, we were strict in a lot of ways where you had to respect your elders. You just don't call your elders by their first name or anything. And you respected the priests, you respected the police, you respected the teachers.
On 13th Street, a group of young boys started to hang out together and form a gang, and thus became the beginning of a friendship that would last more than 50 years. The gang was known as the 13th Street Dogs.
Actually, what had happened is that, like I say, we were all within year or two of each other. It was about 8 or 9 of us guys, and we used to get together every evening. We used to get together at our home. I don't know how our mother put up with all of us, but we used to get together and decide what we were going to do. And in those days, they had 14th Street Bluebirds, they had the Point Furman Terre Hauts, they had different names for these street gangs. That we weren't violent, we just played sports. And we were known as the 13th Street Gang. Yes. Anyway, we decided that we should get some kind of a t-shirt or something that we've all be recognized by. And so myself and another guy, Paul Solnick, who's gone now, we went down into the local merchants, and we saw these white t-shirts with a picture of a bulldog on the front. And I remember they were 89 cents a piece. Money was a problem in those days. So we decided...
Did you have 89 cents?
So we decided to buy that. And all the guys in the gang bought it, and we started wearing them to school and then all over the place. And so we got known as the 13th Street Dogs. And made up our own stuff. You know, we would clean out the vacant lots and play ball or something, and then the gang would always get together and we'd, manage to do something, kick the can or something. My poor sister, she would always want to join us, and when she was it, we'd all disappear because we didn't want her around. To me personally, we were playing football. And
we never had fights with other gangs.
Yeah.
Right.
We had one helmet that we stole from the Navy, and the guy that carried the ball usually got the helmet. But every once in a while, we'd fool him. We'd put the helmet on somebody that wasn't carrying the ball. But I remember the one incident, I was carrying the ball and I got tackled, and I landed in a bunch of glass. And in those days, the only emergency place was the police department, and I got one of the older guys out of the car and took me down there and sewed me up. And of course, I couldn't tell my mother because she didn't know I played ball. But we continued getting together at least once a month and playing poker. Still do it at least once a month.
And that's still happening to today.
That happened last night.
Until 2004.
We were the big winners.
How was the big word?
How many of the 13th Dogs is?
Many things were important to the Slavs. Work, family, tradition. Perhaps the most important was food.
Yeah, you can do anything, but you can't be late for meals. That was a big rule.
That was a big...
All Slavs and Italians. You can do anything you want, but don't be late for meals. When the food's on the table, you had to be there.
Even when we worked and we stopped, after work to go shopping or something, and before we get home, oh my God, they'd have a fit if you were late for dinner.
Yeah, we always had wonderful meals. She took care of everything. Soups and different kind of meats and roasts and chicken, fried chicken and the mustacholi, of course, all that. That was a Sunday dinner, the mustacholi or the fried chicken or the big roast. And she always had something, steaks, a lot of fish, and different kinds of fish.
Vegetables.
I don't know how she learned how to cook all that, She didn't cook that much probably before she left. And fish we grew up with all kinds of ways, abalone. It was treat. My mother, they really knew how to fix fish, I mean, the squid was outstanding.
Oh, yeah.
The squid she would cut up and those all those tentacles and everything, you wonder how she knew how to cook that and make a risotto with it was black.
So
the risotto
good.
was black.
They used the ink out of
the ink. They used the ink from the squid to make the sauce.
The color.
And then she'd chop up little pieces of it in the
It was so
and we never. Then she became famous for her Easter bread, and the world wanted it.
Let's talk about that.
Just on Easter.
Right, and there was no such things as mixers and stuff when she
Hand.
first started. Everything by hand.
hand.
And kneading it and get up and she was fanatic about it, though. I don't know how we got that way.
Yeah.
And she would just.
She'd start at night.
She started at night making hers, and then
all night long.
It would rise. So she'd get up 2-3 times a night, set her clock to see how the bread looks.
And then in early morning, maybe 6 in the morning, she'd get up and it'd be time to put it in the loaves, and she'd do that. And, I mean, it was
she was pretty famous for her bread.
All our relatives, they always said hers was the best.
Yeah.
So
we had met. She believed in doctors, but there was a lot of home remedies. Once I had the flu for a long time, and she was giving me raw eggs and putting the raw eggs in a glass of orange juice, and she'd beat it up.
Oh, that
and
was
it was delicious. But we had to eat that all and drink that all the time.
That was to bring strength back to you after you were
after
sick.
your flu or something, we had raw eggs.
But you know how good that was? She'd beat it and
add a little sugar.
And add a little bit sugar and beat it till it was fluffy.
And
then
that's
she'd
what
add
all the
orange, like an eggnog, because we did. And she used, like I say, if she ever was ill and she's going to recuperate, she'd make 6, 7 of those a day for herself.
At her house.
That was before the days of salmonella poisoning, I guess.
I guess.
We're eating raw eggs.
Yeah.
Christmas in San Pedro was a big deal. A very big deal.
And we used to celebrate on the holidays. On Christmas, Easter, and so on, we would celebrate with other former Yugoslavs, and we had big parties. And we had a lot of fun. The kids had a lot of fun too.
Oh, I remember at Christmas time we used to go from one Croatian home to another.
It was very festive. We went to people's houses. My father had the car and went to all the relatives' houses, and he had a drink at every house, and I'm sure they were bombed by my mother was.
You'd set your table Christmas morning with all your baked goods that you did, and you baked a lot for Christmas, all different cookies and stuff, and all kinds of liqueurs and drinks you put out.
And hard liquor, and that was a table for people.
That was and then every Christmas morning you'd go to this house, to this house,
after church.
You'd stop at everybody's house.
And then you'd have to be home a certain time for the people to come to your house.
Yeah.
And they would sing. Of course, by then they were feeling pretty good.
Yeah, because everybody
they sang
would have
all
a drink.
Christmas songs
Oh,
and
yeah.
regular
songs,
all
American
Croatian.
songs?
No,
Oh, it was all Croatian?
always Croatian.
Christmas, Easter. I can remember in preparation to the big holidays, the vendors from the farms would come by and we would buy a baby goat. And I would take them out into the vacant lots. And so
I felt sorry for that goat.
So we would fatten them up with the grass, and I would bring them in every night in the backyard, and they would slaughter the animal and then barbecue it. And we were so attached to the animal we couldn't eat any of the food.
We cried.
The sweet and all that, and then they'd set up a table with the booze on it and the liqueurs
and
all the
their
cookies.
cookies. Like they were so proud
And you go
of all
from
their
house.
different-
Well, there was
Every house
nothing
the same
else to
thing?
do.
Yeah.
Every house did the same thing.
Yeah.
There was nothing else to do.
and
Or
real
from the same
close
place.
friends, and that you go every Christmas. You go to everybody's house.
Yeah, big
You
one
didn't
was.
stay long. You just go in time. You have a drink and something to eat, and then you go to the
You're
next
full,
house.
yeah.
You didn't
And
even
we'd
sit
go
and visit. You just did that and left.
Like Rudy said, some people had accordions.
They'd play their accordion.
And then Christmas Eve, we would go to my Aunt Grace's, with Grace Lynn's mother.
Yeah.
And they had the big house. They used to do colos, everything.
Most of the Slavs were Catholics, and the Slavs in San Pedro all went to Mary Star of the Sea.
Well, we went always Catholic church, Mary Star of the Sea.
We went to Mary Star to church. We were baptized in communion and confirmation, and we went every Sunday. That's why most of the fishermen paid for that church. If you go to Mary Star, you see on the outside the Blessed Virgin is carrying a boat.
A fishing boat.
Oh, touch it down. It was built by people in San Pedro, given all the money. They were all fishermen that made good and donated pledges.
Yeah.
Everybody donated to build that church. Oh, we did. My mother never went. My father didn't go, but we did.
But she made
Your
sure
mother
we
never
were-
went to church?
No,
No,
always
she was sick.
She was sick every Sunday.
She was sick our whole life.
She claims to this day she always prays, and God knows why she didn't go to church.
Oh, okay.
It was all nerves, and she didn't fight that. I mean, she felt terrible. She really did. It was real to her, and she had to eat every 2 hours, or she thought she would faint. And this is the way her sister and her mother was. It's all psychological, but of course that becomes real, and you feel that way. So she was always sickly. We waited on her hand and foot, and she's 90 today, and still
that's how
going
sick
strong.
she was.
Yeah,
She's still fine.
pretty good for
When
those.
she always seems some way somehow to make it to something that she really wanted to go to. She was sick. She didn't know if she's going to be able to go.
You never planned on it. No.
Never planned on it, but somehow, some way, she always made it to what she really wanted to.
She goes to the doctor, they can't find anything wrong, so it's got to be partly psychological. And she took tranquilizers. She was so bad that doctor prescribed, tranquilizers. It was all those years on Valium, but then we wouldn't have had that much of a life with her without her being on it.
Yeah.
And the doctor said she needs it, and she did. She worked herself into it, or worked herself up into this frenzy where she was too weak to walk across the room, had to keep eating every few hours because or else she would faint, and that kind of stuff.
The advent of technology affected everybody in America, and the Slavs were no exception. Radio, TV, and the movies all came to town in a big way.
We used to go to the movies a lot with
Every
my mother.
Sunday.
Every Sunday,
Every
my
Sunday.
mother loved the movies. I think she learned a lot of English then. She saw every movie, and every movie was watchable at that time. It's not like today's. They were all musicals or stories.
Oh, they loved them.
Mom was always ill, couldn't get to church, but she always made it to the movies.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's her.
Yeah.
There was kind of two ways. My sister worked at the Cabrillo Theater at one time, and she used to let us sneak in. But what we would do, this one guy, Martin Zitko, it's the only guy working. That is, we were all in high school. We all worked anyway. But what we would do, he would pay admission into the theater, and he would open the slide doors with the fire escape for us, and we'd all go scrambling into the theater. Then after a while, we would figure out a way to get together. You know, who had money in those days?
Of course, there wasn't any TV at the time, but a radio finally came in. I think we got a radio by 1940.
We weren't the first on our block. We lived on 17th and on Leland when we got our TV. Our neighbors had the TV across the way, and they were related somehow distantly. And we went there every Monday night, like for Lucy, that was Monday or whatever it was, and Milton Berle show. And they must have been so tired of us coming over, you know. But everybody did. They had a big room full because they were the only ones with the TV. I forget they had this Mexican program. It was Tito Gazar, and he had this big guitar. And on TV, somebody read it in the paper that it was going to be Tito, and they didn't read Gazar. They thought it was Tito from the old country. The phone was buzzing. They called the world. Tito's going to be on Channel 5. You know, that was a big thing. So everybody turned it on. It was Tito Gazar. Remember that? Oh yeah, never forget.
I don't remember that.
They were all standing there waiting for Yugoslavia. If any time they had anything on Croatia, which was hardly ever, I mean, the world would watch it because they were so far removed, you know, from anything there. And there it was, Tito Gazar. I'll never forget. I mean, he must have died 100 years ago, but he was this Mexican singer from Mexico.
Oh, I know.
It was funny. You know, my Uncle Anthony he made a lot more money than my father and had this big, enormous home.
Yeah.
That's the only time we ever left San Pedro was to go with my aunt, this Graceland's mother.
She used to take us a lot of places.
Oh, yeah. And then she would take us to the radio program. That was the only radio. Then we'd go down to Hollywood, see, you know, where NBC and CBS on Hollywood Boulevard, those old big buildings. We'd go in there and see radio shows.
Now, it was a little-known fact that a young Marie Uglasic was a drinker of a beer called Rheingold.
And, you know,
at home you could do all you wanted, wine, beer.
If we wanted wine, we could have it.
So I would, in the summer, I like to drink beer. I enjoy it. I don't know. And we're in the market, and my father's by the beer, and I'm over here by milk or getting something. We'd have a note from my mother what to go buy. And she would never go to the market.
She was too ill to go.
Yeah. Too ill. No, she went later years. We used to take her all the time after my father died.
When my father was alive, she was too ill to go.
Yeah. He yelled across the whole market, "Marie, you want Rheingold?" That was the type of beer. I was mortified. You know, mortified? I mean, who cares? But at that time, I said, oh my, I walked away like I didn't know who he was talking to, and he couldn't find me. He's walking around the store, Marie, you want Rheingold? I was the big lush.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so funny. I'll never forget it. That's just a big, you know, certain things you remember. That I do.
The obsession with college football began in those years. A certain university would be favored over others. That has affected many generations ever since.
So we both favor University of Southern California. It started with our cousin, John Svitanich. I don't even know how he got hooked on USC. But when we were very young,
take a streetcar up there.
For 25 cents, we used to be able to sit under the victory arch in the end zone. And I know I used to go up and down the alleys and try to find bottles that had you can return.
Get a nickel.
And get it so we can get money, if I can get my quarter to go to the game. Brainwashed real young.
Back at the Uglasic household, two young sisters were growing up, and getting along like only sisters could.
On it, I was the brat. I was the younger baby, and I was a brat.
You were.
I
Still
was. No, I know I was. I wanted everything she did. I wanted to do. I know
the biggest
that.
thing I remember me putting my armor. Had to put my armor on her every night. We slept together. They had 2-bedroom house, and so I had to.
I was scared.
She was scared, so Marie had to put her armor on her every night like this, and my arm would hurt. I was sick and tired of it, so I go like that and take it off, and Marie took her arm off, and my mother put your arm around her because he wanted to. I mean, I did like a dope. I listened,
and I'd always say, "Man, she took her." I remember that she took her arm off.
I remember because I was so upset.
Oh, or then when we were a little bit older, we still had the same bedroom, but we bought a new twin
beds, yeah.
And then she wanted to listen to the radio, and I didn't want her to.
Yeah.
I was just being mean. I said, "The radio's bothering me. Turn the radio off."
The reason
Marie.
was I got back at her. One time she bent my arm and we were arguing, and I pretended I fainted. I'm laying there on the floor. She's, Marie, get up! And my mother was coming home, and I kept pretending I was out, that she really hurt me. I said, "I'll fix you."
Oh,
you really panicked.
I don't remember.
Marie and Betty Uklasich also became known for their fine babysitting skills.
We were babysitting
across the street.
We used to watch these 3 boys.
These 3 boys, the 2 of us together. And so we cooked dinner.
time.
We had to warm up their dinner.
We were making them grilled cheese.
Oh, is that what it was?
So we're gonna put it in the broiler, I think, and we turned the broiler on. Well,
it didn't go on.
It didn't go on, so I'm looking for a match.
For an hour.
For an hour.
And the gas.
And then I finally found it, and I went straight up, poof.
Oh, yeah.
On the front of my hair,
burned,
my
eyelashes.
eyelashes, my eyebrow. Oh,
I started crying,
and I ran home.
She ran home, and I was there with the kids, and the house smelled of gas. Yeah, that's right. We did that.
Oh.
And one time I was watching those same boys myself, and I was watching a movie. That's where there's television, and it was the Fighting Sullivans. Remember that movie where all of them get killed, the whole family in World War II, and they were in the Navy. I was crying so hard. The parents came home, and I'm crying like a baby. They said, "What happened?" They thought something was wrong with their kids. I was crying because I saw this movie.
Oh, jeez.
It's the little silly things you remember.
Every year in San Pedro, the really big event was the Fisherman's Fiesta.
Then we used to go down. The big thing in San Pedro was the Fisherman Fiesta. That was every September, and that was the biggest thing that hit this town.
Yeah.
And it was a Catholic thing. They had the blessing. It was
3-day event.
It was a 3-day event, the weekend, and the Cardinal of Los Angeles would come down and bless the fishing fleet, so they'd have a good year, the following year. And we'd all get on, like whatever boat my father was fishing on. They'd decorate all the boat.
You'd be invited.
You'd be invited. You have to be invited.
The boat was packed.
100 people on these little fishing boats, and they'd bring the food, cook the food, and we'd parade around the harbor several times. They'd be decorated. Every boat was decorated. Then they have a prize for the first place, second place, third place.
Yeah, but at first they didn't have the prizes for decoration because it was just flags.
It was just flags.
Just flags. Then they got
real
elaborate.
big. It was one of the most photographed events after the Rose Parade in California, the Fisherman's Fiesta in San Pedro.
What kind of food was
down there? You couldn't move on the dock. Packed.
Actually got started is that when the fishermen changed their nets from the tuna net to the sardine net, the turntable was always empty, where they had the big net stacked. And so just the families of the fishermen, we used to go over to Catalina and we'd stop at the isthmus and have barbecue and whatever. Well, they got so that quite a few boats went out that way, and the people would sit down the docks and wait. And one thing led to another thing, and it was the church that got into the act and started to bless the fleet. And that's when everything changed, and everything. Then hundreds of people are aboard one fishing boat instead of just families.
And so it went. The Karmelich family and the Uklasich family would ultimately come together as one. The family would never stray far from San Pedro, and their Croatian culture was maintained and remembered. Ben and Marie would late make several trips to visit the old country, although Antitsa Uklasich never wanted to go back.
Never. She always said, people would say, "Oh, they went for a trip, and it's beautiful, it's this, it's that," and my mother would say, pictures look better than it is. She always
I don't remember
said
that.
Eventually, life in San Pedro would change. The fishing industry, for one, slowly began to disappear.
The fishing industry started taking knocks when the Japanese started to fish in the South Pacific, and they would bring over the frozen fish, and it was a lot cheaper than the local stuff. Now the longshore industry has always been involved, but the union started in 1933, and now because of our ability to get very good contracts from the employers and our benefits, everybody's fighting for the jobs. And the city prospered, but personally, I liked it the way it was.
Even though the city changed, the San Pedro Slavs stayed the same, and the values learned will be present in many generations to come.
It was a pleasant life. Almost all our friends were people with similar backgrounds. His family came from Croatia, and we had a lot of friends, but they all were Croatian families.
Whenever we got together in a room, you always felt the warmth and the love, and it was just like one huge family. We all cared for one another and loved one another, still do.
I think we were raised that way with a sense of family, and our parents were raised that way with their families, and I think I've raised you guys that way. I could see it's obvious. You still want to be together as a family, the birthdays, and you include Betty's family, which I think that's so important in life.
Well, I don't know what. I mean, we're together constantly, and we're just like blood brothers. You know, like I say, we have a lot of love for one another, and we have a lot of close, intimate friends, which I don't see a lot of that going on today. You know, I have a lot of friends, but not intimate friends like our gang. You know, we live and die with them.
And we just did these things always together as a family, and we enjoyed it. And if you can't enjoy your family, you're not going to enjoy too much else, I don't think.
Lots of tasty fish. Oh, take me, take me, take me, take me to the fisherman's fiesta. Take me to the fisherman's fiesta, baby, take me there. All the boats in San Pedro will be decorated so nice. We're gonna sail around the harbor, maybe round it twice. Yo, take me, take me, take me, take me to the fisherman's fiesta. Take me to the fisherman's fiesta, baby, take me there. To the music we'll be dancing, something pretty I will wear. On a boat by the moonlight, baby, won't you take me there? Take me, take me, take me, take me to the fisherman's fiesta. Take me, take me, take me, take me to the fisherman's fiesta. Take me, take me, take me, take me to the fisherman's fiesta. Take me to the fisherman's fiesta, baby.